Golden Spike National Historical Site. We drove west to the Golden Spike National Historical Site in Utah. Abuelo said we were going to see a place made famous by a spike made of gold. We thought he was kidding, but he wasn't. The first thing we did was watch a film about railroad history. We learned that in 1863, workers started building the first transcontinental railroad. They started building one end of the railroad track in the east, while other workers started building the other end in the west. They kept building until the two tracks met at a mountain in Utah in 1869. The connection of the tracks was completed with a special golden spike. The whole country was connected from coast to coast. The railroad made it easier for people to move west. Before then, it took people months to travel west by horse and wagon. Later, we drove by an arch-shaped rock named Chinese Arch. The park gave it the name to honor the thousands of men who came from China to work on the railroad. The work was very hard, and without them, the railroad would have taken much longer to complete. Afterward, many of the Chinese workers stayed and settled in the West. Juan Batista Danza National Historical Trail. After a long drive over the mountains and desert, we reached Santa Barbara, California. After getting a bite to eat, my dad surprised us with a train ride. It wasn't just any train ride. The train went along the Juan Batista Danza National Historical Trail, which made it extra special. On the train ride, a tour guide told us about Juan Batista Danza and his journey. Anza was a Spanish explorer and soldier. He established the first European settlement in San Francisco. In order to settle in San Francisco, Anza had to find a route from Mexico to the coast of California, which he did in 1774. Then, in October 1775, Anza led soldiers and their families on a 2,900-kilometer, 1,800 miles, journey from Mexico. They arrived in San Francisco in June of 1776. There were no cars or buses back then, so the group traveled with horses and wagons. Native Americans such as the Yuma Nation helped them on their way. As the train moved along, I looked out the window at the beautiful California countryside. I was looking at the same land Anza saw as he guided hundreds of people over the rivers, desert, and mountains. You know how we have roads to travel on? Well, Anza didn't have them. I tried to imagine how tough the journey was. I also learned that Anza's group included many different nationalities. There were Spanish soldiers, Native Americans, and people of African heritage. Altogether, 240 people, including children, and a herd of 1,000 livestock animals made the trip. A few hours later, the train ride ended in the city of San Luis Obispo. We ate dinner and walked around for a while. Anza and his group passed through San Luis Obispo, too. As we headed back to the train station, my dad said, "Vayan subiendo." This means everybody mount up. We learned this is what Anza said to the group every morning on their journey. The Grand Canyon. After a few days in Santa Barbara, we drove east to Arizona. Oscar and I were super excited. We were finally going to see the Grand Canyon. I'd seen pictures of the canyon, but I still wasn't ready for the real thing. The Grand Canyon is spectacular. Dad got a booklet from the visitor center. We read the canyon is 29 kilometers, 18 miles wide, 446 kilometers, or 277 miles long, and 2 kilometers, 1 mile deep. We all boarded a small bus. We stopped at different overlooks where we had really good views of the canyon. I was amazed by the rocks in the canyon, which are all different shades of red. When the sun shines on them, they seem to glow. I took a ton of pictures. I also saw red-tailed hawks circling in the sky. On our second day, we went on a raft trip down the Colorado River. As we paddled down the calm river, the guide told us that the river carved the Grand Canyon. The water wore the rock away over millions of years. Erosion, I blurted out. I learned this word when we were in the Badlands. The guide also said the land in the canyon is hard and dry. When the water rushes over the land, the ground can't absorb it. Instead, the water wears away the dirt and rock. It's amazing to think that water could create the giant canyon. National Park cool fact. There is a small community of people who live in the Grand Canyon. The Havasupai tribe lived in Supai Village, which is located at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. They have lived there for more than 1,000 years. Aztec Ruins National Monument. Our very last stop, we visited the Aztec Ruins National Monument in New Mexico. Native Americans created the buildings about 900 years ago. The Native Americans people were called Ancestral Pueblo. Pueblo wondered why the ruins are called Aztec, if the Ancestral Pueblo built them, but a park ranger had an explanation ready for him. I guess a lot of people wonder the same thing. She said that in the 1800s, people thought that the Aztecs lived in the area of what is now New Mexico. Explorers often called ruins in the past of the country Aztec. Later, scientists realized Aztec never lived there, but the name stuck, and we still refer to the ruins as Aztec ruins to this day. We wanted to learn more about the ancient people. Oscar and I walked through the ruins. Can you imagine living here? I asked him. We felt as if we had walked back in time as we roamed through the rooms made of stone. My dad had to bend over to get through the small doorways. We learned the ruins have 400 rooms. Look, Oscar yelled. He found a fingerprint in the rock wall. I couldn't believe I was looking at it. An ancient fingerprint. It was left by a worker who put the stones together. I touched it, and with my finger, it was like I was touching history. Then we visited the museum, which had really cool artifacts. We saw the pottery the Ancestral Pueblo made, which was very pretty designs. It was time to leave and start our journey home to Missouri. It was an amazing trip, and I'm so glad we got to spend 2 weeks exploring some of beautiful USA.